Okay, now this is a multi-part video, so if you missed the earlier ones, you'll have to go back and look. But I wanted to give you another update so you can follow along. Again, this is installation of my Boss Bluetooth speaker system on a Suzuki C90T Boulevard. Of course, this would apply to any bike in which you decided you wanted to install those Boss speakers. Now, if you remember in video 1, I showed you the pre-installation of where I installed the speakers here on the bars, and I went through that process. In video 2, I prepped you for some of the installation work and fuse-in lines and stuff that would have to be done. Now, I told you I'd come back when I had the installation almost complete, and I'm at that point. And I can tell you that there's a lot of items that did not come with your purchase, and if you're going to do this right, you're going to need some wire, and you're going to do some splicing and so forth. And I just want to, let me first start by giving you an overview. I've tucked my wires. You can see my power wire originally that starts out here, and I've rolled it over, and I'm going to tie this off, and it comes down, and I had to lift my tank and roll those power wires. Well, they were too short, so I had to buy extensions and put me some extensions. So here's a positive, negative, we'll call it extension. And so I had to run those extensions out so I'd have enough length. Because remember that configuration that we had and we discussed in video 2. Well, I also, on my relay, I showed you in video 2 on my relay, I bought it with pigtails attached. Well, here's where I've connected my relay. Right here on your battery box, on the back side, I drilled a small hole. And you can see I pushed a nut, and I put double washers on here and tightened that down because of the, well, just the vibrations and stuff of the bike. So I have actually mounted that here, and the pigtails are underneath, but the pigtails turn and come back up. And in video 2, I told you which color went where. But let me show you something now. That chassis ground that I talked about in video 2. Well, I made me an eyelet, and I just grounded it right here on the back side of that battery. You can see that's my chassis ground. Well, I had to make me another eyelet for the ground to the battery, the negative. Remember, that came off of the black wire. So I grounded it. I made an eyelet and grounded it. Now this other second one is actually my battery tender. So don't worry about it, but I made me one here that would be my negative. And remember, we did an inline 2 amp fuse for the positive red that went to the red on the relay. That does not go to the positive on the battery. It goes to the positive point on the relay. Go back to video 2, because that goes to that red. Well, as I told you, it was short, so I had to extend it. But all's well, all is crimped in place with a 2 amp fuse in place. And then, of course, I mentioned to you and told you that the white wire would come out, and you would need to also add some items in there. So that white wire needed an extension because it is an ignition switch wire. That means you only want these powered when the ignition is on. So I had to probe to find me a 12-volt source only when the ignition is on, so you don't drain your battery. So remember, the white wire coming off the relay, I had to make a patch cable. Here it is. And I came across and I tapped right here on your battery. You can see this labeled 38740. I'm looking at it upside down. But if you'll probe that, you'll find a 12-volt source that you can tap to only when the ignition is on. And that's what I've done. I've tapped on that so that I have now power when the ignition is on. So that's your ignition wire. And listen, and you can hear it when I flip this on. There's my speakers. Then when I turn it off, power off, so you'll never drain your battery. Okay. Now, remember I had a positive inline. Okay, here it is. There's my fuse. That's that fuse going to the positive right here. And it comes around also. And it was the blue. It originally started as a blue wire. And the blue wire came up and went to your battery. But you had to put an inline. I described that to you, an inline. I believe this one was a 3 amp actually. But you had to put an inline fuse in it to go to your battery. So there it is. Now I've tied all this up neatly. So that's out of the way. So okay, so we had the black that came off of the relay, and it was a chassis ground. There it is. We had a blue that came off of the relay. If you remember, it went to the battery, and I made an eyelet for it. Okay. Then you remember you had a white that was your ignition, as I just described to you, that went over to your ignition. And then of course you had your red that came off of your relay and fed to the red wire that came with your speaker system, and I had to put a patch in. So there's your combo. Now the yellow that is on my pigtail is not used at all. So it's just tucked down there, and I've tied all these off. And I can tell you that this is a couple-hour job, I'd say. If you're going to do it right with the relay installed to protect all your electrical, you're going to spend a couple of hours on this job, and you're going to need some. Some items, and you can see I have different pieces I shared with you earlier. I bought some 2 amp. I bought some inline. I've got crimp connectors, and don't forget, if you're going to do crimping, get the right tool. Don't think that pliers, just ordinary pliers, will work. You need that crimping tool to make sure they're secure, and then of course secure all your connections and all. And you can see on all of my connections, I've come back and wrapped them finally, also. So take your time, do it right. Now the last thing I have to do is I have to determine where I'm going to put this volume control and aux input. And I haven't decided that yet, but I'm going to find a location and determine a way to mount it. I thought about drilling it in and pushing it in on the side here, maybe, so I could just reach over and turn the volume up and down, but I hate to cut into any factory hardware like that. So we'll see what I'm going to do. But I have tested it. Now I can't show you, I can't play you the music because of copyright stuff, but I can tell you that the volume can be very loud. I did test it, and you know, of course, using my phone, and I turn the volume up, and it can get pretty darn loud. So I think the sound is going to be pretty good, actually. But I can't show you a sound video. It'll be restricted. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, this is the installation of the Boss Bluetooth with an aux connection on a Suzuki C90 2016, but this would be applicable, of course, to any bike. So hopefully it's been helpful.